Okay, good afternoon for you. I hope you're doing great.
For starting this subject, we need to state that fluency is not talent, it is training. Many people believe fluency is something you are born with. They think fluent speakers are naturally confident, fast thinkers, or gifted communicators. This belief is wrong and harmful. Fluency is not about speaking fast. It is not about using big words. And moreover, it is not about never making mistakes. Fluency is the ability to express your thoughts clearly and naturally, even when you're not nervous. And even when you are nervous, most people struggle with speaking, not because they lack intelligence, but because they overthink, they fear judgment, they try to sound perfect, and they don't practice correctly. This book is not about tricks, it is about building real speaking fluency, step by step, mentally, emotionally, and practically. If you can think, you can speak fluently. You just need the right process.
Then let's start with the first chapter that revolves around the psychology of silence. For the first question, we have why intelligent people struggle to speak and how fear shapes the voice. Truly speaking, silence is rarely empty. Most of the time, silence is full. It's full of thoughts that were never spoken, questions that stayed inside, answers that were judged before they were allowed to exist. Many people believe they are silent because they have nothing to say. This is almost never true. Silence is not caused by a lack of ideas. Silence is caused by fear and interrupting expression. To understand fluency, we must first understand silence because they are reciprocal, not as a weakness but as a psychological response. Children speak freely before they learn fear. They speak without worrying about grammar, logic, or maybe judgment. Their speech flows because their identity is not yet tied to performance. At some point, something changes. Correction is delivered harshly. Love appears at the wrong moment. Comparison is made, teacher interrupts, and the parent dismisses. Peer mocks. The children learns dangerous lesson, which is speaking can hurt. From that moment, speech is no longer innocent. It becomes monitored. Silence begins as a protection. When people say, for example, my mind goes blank when I speak, they believe the problem is about thinking. It is not. The mind does not go blank because it is empty. It goes blank because it feels unsafe. And then fear activates the nervous system's survival response. In that state, the brain prioritizes safety over expression. Speech requires openness, and fear creates contradiction or maybe contraction. This is why intelligent people often struggle more than others. They are thinking too much about the ramifications and consequences. At some point, external judgment becomes internal. You begin to watch yourself while speaking. You evaluate every sentence as it forms, and you correct yourself before others can. This internal observer creates distance between thought and voice. You are no longer speaking, you are performing, and performance is extremely onerous and exhausting. Fluent speakers are not better thinkers, they are simply less supervised internally, and perfectionism does not improve speech, it interrupts it. When you aim for the perfect sentence, you delay speech until certainty arrives, and certainty never arrives. And then fluency requires movement, and perfectionism requires control. You cannot have both at the same time. Fluent speakers allow incomplete sentences, self-corrections, and simple language. They value continuation over precision, and speaking exposes you, and of course, silence hides you. Then In silence, you cannot be misunderstood, you cannot be rejected, you cannot fail publicly. The brain interprets silence as a safety or maybe as a protection, but safety has a cost. Over time, silence becomes identity. For example, let's take this adage: I'm not someone who speaks. This belief is not true, but it becomes familiar. The voice carries memory. If you were once embarrassed while speaking, your body remembers. The throat tightens, breathing shortens, and words hesitate. This is not a weakness, it's a matter of condition. The body learned to associate speech with danger, and fluency requires reteaching the body that speaking is safe. Many people judge themselves harshly for being quiet, but silence often begins as a matter of intelligence, knowing when not to speak, avoiding harm, and observing carefully. The problem is not silence itself, the problem is being trapped in it. And then fluency is not about becoming loud, it's about becoming free to choose. The moment fluency begins is subtle. It happens when the question changes. Not, for example, how will they see me, but what do I genuinely and authentically want to express. Meaning dissolves fear. And when you speak for meaning, fluency follows naturally.
Then, let's move on to the second chapter that revolves around how fluent thinkers think, the quiet mental habits that allow speech to flow. In fact, fluency is not a speed, but it's a permission, the permission to think imperfectly, the permission to speak without certainty, the permission to exist in language as you are, not as you wish to appear. Fluent thinkers are not free of doubt. They simply do not let doubt interrupt motion. Many people treat thoughts like fragile objects that must be fully formed before being shown. They polish them internally, reshape them silently, and often discard them before speaking. In fact, fluent thinkers treat thoughts differently. They understand that thoughts are alive, not finished products. And then a thought gains clarity through movement. It becomes clearer only when allowed to exist in sound. When you wait for perfect thought, you stop the process that creates clarity, and then fluency begins when you stop waiting. In fact, non fluent speakers see speech as delivery. For example, let's take this adage: I must deliver something correct. Fluent thinkers see speech as discovery, and then they can say, I will discover what I think by speaking. The shift changes everything. Speech becomes an exploration instead of a risk or maybe jeopardy. Curiosity replaces fear, and when you speak to discover, mistakes lose their power. That fluent mind feels spacious. There is room for pauses, uncertainty, correction, and even silence. Cramped mind tries to control every outcome, and the spacious mind allows outcomes to unfold. So, fluency grows when your inner environment is calm enough to host ideas without panic. Many people admire fast speakers and believe speed equals intelligence. This is a misconception. In fact, fast speech often hides anxiety, and clear speech reflects grounded thinking. That's why we consider that fluent thinkers slow down their inner pace. They let one idea complete itself before moving to the next. Slowness is not weakness, slowness is a matter of authority. Fluent thinkers do not search endlessly for the best idea, they trust the first honest one, and honesty carries momentum, and manipulation creates a kind of hesitation. When you stop editing your intention, words arrive more easily. That's why we consider preparation is useful, and over preparation is paralyzing and to some extent perplexing. Memorized speech feels safe until the moment it breaks. When that happens, fear multiplies. Fluent thinkers prepare ideas, not scripts. They know if you understand the idea, language will follow, and then we can consider that mistake is not a verdict. Fluent thinkers do not emotionally react to errors, they adjust and continue, and emotion fuels interruption as well as neutrality fuels continuity. Speaking fluently requires a settled courage, allowing others to witness your thinking in real time. This exposure feels risky, but it is what creates connection. People trust speakers who think aloud because they feel human, and fear separates that from voice. So, fluency reconnects them. When you stop protecting your thoughts from being heard, your voice regains strength. Let's move on to the chapter 3 that revolves around the body remembers the voice, how breath, tension, and posture shape fluency. In fact, speech does not live only in the mind, it lives in the body. Many people try to fix their speaking by correcting thoughts, choosing better words, or maybe rehearsing sentences. Your fluency often fails not because the mind is confused, but because the body is tight, guarded, and braced. The body remembers every moment the voice felt and safe. To speak freely again, the body must be included in the healing process. And then, when fear appears, the body responds instantly. Shoulders tighten, breath shortens, jaw stiffens, and throat narrows. This reaction is automatic. It happens before that. Tense body restricts air, and the restricted air restricts the voice. Fluency cannot exist where breathing is shallow. Every word relies on breath. Without enough air, the voice rashes, strains, or maybe fades. Many people speak while holding their breath, especially when nervous. This creates a kind of rushed sentences, weak volume, sudden pauses, and loss of confidence. Fluent speakers breathe before they speak, not as an afterthought, but as a preparation. Then, we can consider that breath is a permission. People tense their bodies to feel in control. Ironically, tension removes control. Tense body limits vocal range, emotional expression, and clarity. Relaxation does not mean collapse. It means availability. In fact, relaxed body allows sound to move naturally, and the voice carries emotion, even when words do not. When you speak while tense, the voice sounds guarded. When you speak while relaxed, the voice sounds grounded. Then listeners respond more to tone than to the content. Fluency is felt before it is understood, and posture shapes the confidence. Posture is not cosmetic, it's psychological. Collapsed posture signals the nervous system to shrink. Open posture signals safety and presence. Standing or sitting upright with the chest open and feet grounded immediately improves vocal strength. So the body leads, the mind follows, and the throat is the most guarded part of the speaking body. It tightens when you fear judgment, suppress emotion, try to sound right. A tight throat chokes fluency. Gentle breathing, yawning motions, humming, and slow speech soften the tension and reopen the voice. In fact, many people speak only from the head, fast, tight, and disconnected. Fluent speakers speak from lower in the body, supported by breath, grounded in the chest, resonant in the belly. This creates stability. And when the body supports speech, words no longer feel fragile. You cannot force fluency. The body must feel safe first. The safety comes from slow breathing, non judgmental practice, allowing silence, and gentle repetition. Fluency grows when the body stops bracing. And if your voice has failed you before your body remembers, rebuilding trust takes patience. And remember that each time you speak calmly, breathe fully, and allow your voice to exhaust without correction, so the body learns it is safe to speak. This learning is extremely physical, not intellectual. Let's move on to the fourth chapter, speaking with others. Fluency as a shared human experience. In fact, speaking does not happen in isolation. It happens in the presence of another mind, another nervous system, and of course, another history. This is why speaking can feel so vulnerable. We're not afraid of words, we're afraid of being seen. Fluency changes when you stop seeing speaking as an exposure and begin seeing it as a relationship. The moment another person is involved, speech carries risk. That spoken aloud can be misunderstood, ignored, challenged, and even remembered. This vulnerability often causes people to shrink their voice or maybe speak cautiously. Fluent speakers do not eliminate this risk. In fact, they accept it. They understand that connection requires an openness. When you perform, you create a gap between yourself and others. And then the performance asks, how am I doing? The presence asks, how are you doing? People feel the difference immediately. Presence does not require cleverness. In fact, it requires attention. Many people speak while looking away, protecting themselves. Fluent speakers say they allow eye contact even when you are unsure, and they allow reactions to exist. Staying present grounds